The Caribbean Sea glitters under the tropical sun, its waves rolling gently toward the shores of Venezuela. On the surface, these waters suggest paradise, but beneath, they carry the weight of politics, power, and military strategy. For several years now, U.S. warships have been a constant presence just beyond Venezuela's territorial waters. Officially, Washington describes these patrols as counter-narcotics missions, part of a global effort to stop drug trafficking. Yet for many observers, and for Venezuela itself, the presence looks much more like a blockade, a deliberate effort to isolate and pressure the government of Maduro. The question is simple, but the answers are layered. Why are U.S. warships actually there? And what do they reveal about the broader struggle for influence in Latin America? The roots of today's naval standoff stretch back decades. Venezuela, once one of Washington's closest partners in the hemisphere, shifted course under President Hugo in the late 1980s. With fiery rhetoric, positioned Venezuela as a leader of anti-U.S. movements, cultivating alliances with Russia, China, Iran, and Cuba. After Maduro continued the same trajectory, Washington responded with sanctions, cutting Venezuela off from international finance, limiting its oil sales, and denouncing its elections as illegitimate. This political estrangement set the stage for confrontation, not only through words, but also through ships patrolling the seas. From Washington's perspective, the story is straightforward. The Caribbean and Eastern Pacific are major arteries for cocaine trafficking, primarily from Colombia. Cartels often use Venezuela as a staging point, moving narcotics onto boats, semi-submersibles, and cargo ships that sail northward. The U.S. Navy, alongside the Coast Guard and regional allies, intercepts these vessels. The mission is framed as a matter of security, protecting American communities from drugs, supporting allies against organized crime, and upholding maritime law. In press conferences, American officials rarely use the word blockade. Instead, they highlight seizures, arrests, and the billions in narcotics taken off the market. But inside Venezuela, the narrative is very different. To President Maduro and his supporters, the U.S. warships are not neutral patrols, but instruments of coercion. In speeches, Maduro has accused Washington of preparing an invasion, of trying to strangle Venezuela's economy, and of using counter-narcotics as a convenient excuse. To many Venezuelans, the presence of destroyers and Coast Guard cutters so close to their shores feels like encirclement, even if the ships never enter territorial waters. The image of foreign warships hovering on the horizon reinforces the idea of a nation under siege. Technically, there is no declared blockade. International law requires a formal announcement, which the United States has not made. But in practice, a soft blockade can look very similar. Warships patrol shipping lanes, creating delays. Cargo vessels bound for Venezuelan ports face increased scrutiny from insurers and shipping companies. Some companies avoid Venezuelan routes altogether, fearing complications. The result is subtle but powerful. Trade becomes riskier and more expensive. Supplies take longer to arrive. In effect, Venezuela feels the squeeze of naval pressure, even without a single shot being fired. Geography explains why this region matters so much. Venezuela sits on the northern edge of South America, directly facing the Caribbean Sea. Just to the west lies the Panama Canal, one of the world's most important shipping routes. Control over this region has been a cornerstone of U.S. naval strategy for more than a century. By maintaining a constant presence, Washington sends a message not only to Venezuela, but also to rival powers that the Caribbean remains an American sphere of influence. Washington also accuses elements within Venezuela's military and government of involvement in narcotics trafficking. Several Venezuelan officials have been indicted in U.S. courts at the same time. Venezuela's vital oil industry has been crippled by sanctions. While oil once made Venezuela one of the wealthiest nations in Latin America, today exports are limited, and many foreign buyers are deterred by the risk of U.S. penalties. The naval patrols amplify this pressure. Even if they do not directly stop oil shipments, their presence discourages trade, creating the image of a country cut off at sea. The presence of U.S. warships cannot be separated from Venezuela's global alliances. Russia has provided military advisors and flown bombers to Venezuelan airfields. China has extended loans and invested in infrastructure. Iran has shipped fuel to ease shortages. To Washington, these moves represent an intrusion into its own neighborhood. For decades, the United States has treated the Caribbean as a zone of uncontested influence. A rival power gaining a foothold there is viewed as a direct challenge. Thus, the warships also serve as a signal, a warning to Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran, that their ambitions in Venezuela will be closely monitored and, if necessary, contained. Legally, the U.S. insists it is operating in international waters fully within its rights. Critics argue that the intent matters as much as the letter of the law. If the effect of patrols is to strangle a nation's economy, then the line between interdiction and blockade blurs. This debate highlights a reality of modern geopolitics. Not every pressure campaign is declared. Not every blockade is announced. Sometimes the presence of ships alone is enough to achieve strategic goals. Beyond the politics and strategy lies the everyday impact. Venezuelans already live under immense strain, hyperinflation, shortages, and unemployment. For them, the presence of warships adds another layer of uncertainty. Importers face higher costs. Essential goods become harder to find. Families hear their leaders speak of encirclement and invasion, heightening fear. Even if the naval patrols never fire a shot, they contribute to the sense of isolation that shapes Venezuelan life today. Supporters of U.S. policy argued that the patrols are justified. Cartels move billions of dollars worth of narcotics through these waters each year, fueling addiction and violence far beyond Venezuela. Without naval pressure, traffickers would operate with impunity. Critics counter that the naval presence is less about drugs and more about politics. They argue that the true goal is to weaken Maduro's government, regardless of the impact on ordinary Venezuelans. Both perspectives contain elements of truth. The war on drugs is real, but so is the geopolitical contest for influence. The future of this maritime standoff depends on broader global currents. If U.S. relations with Russia, China, and Iran grow more tense, Washington will have even more incentive to maintain its naval presence near Venezuela. Meanwhile, Venezuela will continue to portray the warships as proof of foreign aggression. The seas will remain a stage for political theater as much as for interdiction. Technological change will also shape the conflict. Advanced surveillance systems, artificial intelligence, and drones will make naval monitoring more precise, leaving traffickers and traders alike under constant watch. So why are U.S. warships actually blockading Venezuela, or at least appearing to? Officially to stop narcotics, strategically to enforce sanctions, deter rival powers, and signal dominance in the Caribbean. Symbolically, to show that the United States still holds sway in its own hemisphere. For Venezuela, the ships represent encirclement and pressure. For Washington, they are tools of influence and control. For ordinary citizens, they are part of a larger story of hardship, resilience, and uncertainty. The blockade may not be declared in law, but in practice, the presence of warships tells a story of silent pressure, contested waters, and the enduring struggle for power in the Americas.